Labor Talks was John DeRozier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Good day, this is Labor Talks. I'm John DeRozier, and today's special guest is Chris Hambuch Boyle, who serves on the Eau Claire Area School Board and is a proud member of WEAC. Welcome to Labor Talks, Chris.
Hi, John. Nice to be here.
Okay, and I'm sorry I almost interrupted. We are a little bit informal here.
Good. So am I. I like to be
Okay.
informal.
Now, how long have you served on the school board, and how long were you a member of WEAC, and what did you accomplish when you were as a school board member?
Well, I've been a member of WEAC since the Eau Claire Area School District went with NEA, the National Education Association. I think it was in 1982, somewhere in there. I was hired in the district in 1979. So there was a union change there. But I've been a member ever since. And when I retired, I became a lifetime member of WEAC, retired. So I did serve many different things when I was a member of the union. I started my interest in the public relations piece so that we could really celebrate what teachers gave to the profession for our children and our families and our community. So I helped plan the retirement parties in the beginning and got more and more interested in what the union really offered us as members. And then I became a level rep at the preschool elementary level. And then I became vice president, and then I was on negotiations as well. So participated nationally at our rep assemblies to really see 10,000 teachers who gathered to steer the NEA's agenda for the year. Amazing experience to be part of all that. So I really look at my union as being my professional organization. Relied on them heavily when I went for my national board certification. They just provide a lot for professional development and studies and feedback and surveys and things that education can use on a daily basis.
Oh, okay. Now, it's been said that Governor Scott Walker and his allies have hurt education in Wisconsin. Has that resulted in fewer teachers and a higher student-teacher ratio?
Well, that's kind of lots of different pieces within your question, and your question's well taken. I think, people often think I could just, as a former teacher and as a school member, I could just say yes, but that really would be kind of a flippant answer in the scope of the big picture of what this looks like. So I wrote a few hints for me to talk about this in a timeline, so to speak. The piece about public education right now and what is really bothersome really started back in 1993 under Tommy Thompson, when they put in the 2/3 funding, the qualified economic offer law, and the revenue caps. Okay, so actually, I brought this piece of paper when we started to cut in Eau Claire. It was back in 93, 94. We made $1,466,336 even that year in cuts, because we were a really fiscally responsible district. We were locked in at a lower rate, so as a district our size, we were probably one of the first in the state to start to cut. So you could pull our governor into this, and he is, because he gave us some of the biggest cuts recently in the last 4 years and Act 10. But the piece about taxes and how we pay for our public schools really came heavily to light in 1993, and we've been really cutting ever since.
Now, is Wisconsin losing its more experienced teachers, and are you now getting less experienced teachers?
Well, that's another good question, and I love to be asked to talk about this because that's another yes and no, because you have to look at the big picture. So it's a great question, John. I think
it's about time I asked one.
You ask good questions. I think you could say yes, that we're losing experienced teachers, because the year Act 10 went into place, we had the largest number of teachers retire. I think they were scared. They were worried about working, their whole career for their retirement, because that was part of our wage. We didn't make tons of money in a salary, but we knew we had a good retirement, and we knew that was there for us when we retired. And as women, which is mostly who teachers are, the higher percentage of women in the field, I think that was the case. Now, the less experienced teachers are this. There's other programs that are part of the picture now. Teach for America is one. That's a program where kids can come out of college and have a 6-week training course, and they can go into our inner city schools and teach. It's not necessarily the best thing for our schools because we don't have the experience that would come from someone who went through a program that taught them to be a teacher. But a lot of schools, not necessarily in Wisconsin, use kids that are Teach for America. But I just read an article, as you look at teachers and they're in the classroom and they are decision making every minute for kids. You have 26 kids in your class, and you're in essence running 26 personal little programs for these kids, knowing where they're at. And so I just read an article where Google really likes to hire those kids that are in business, but they go out for 2 years, Teach for America, they get some kickbacks for their tuition or whatever. They love those kids as employees because they've learned those things being a teacher in the classroom. So I think that's kind of a tribute to the profession, not necessarily that Teach for America is what we should be doing for who's in front of the classroom. So I also know that there's a 10% decrease in people going into education right now. That's huge, and that's going to come back to haunt us because people really feel the profession is not where they want to be. And teaching is the profession that starts all other professions. And so for me, that's really troublesome. And as far as lower paid, we have things going on all over our state relative to salaries. We have things like we freeze the salaries, but we hire a new person. We give them 4 years experience on the pay scale to get them to come here, and they're making more than our experienced teachers because they're frozen. Those are things that have to be fixed. We've had record number of resignations because the teaching profession in Wisconsin now is more mobile. There are districts that are headhunting, certain positions, special ed, physics, away from districts who aren't paying as much as they can pay them because the school funding is not equitable across the state. You see the complication of it? So to answer it just to say yes or no, it's a more complicated answer.
It almost sounds like you're at cross purposes here. That's just my take on it. But you're bringing in teachers who don't have the experience. They're dedicated. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you're keeping teachers who have the experience, and you have this conflict because the less experienced teachers, their pay is rising, while the experienced teachers, their pay is frozen. So you have this cross-purposes type thing.
There is, and I think people have to hang in there with us because we just did a compensation study. It showed us a lot. We do so value our employees and our staff that make our district still, through all of this, we are a high-performing district. We really are. Mm-hmm. We should be so proud, not just me as a board member, but as a community and what we've been able to keep band-aided together for our community as far as the quality that we offer in our public schools here in Eau Claire.
Yeah, we see that because we read reports in the newspapers where the students really are scoring high in all the
above the state average. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. So this leads me into my next question. How are students reacting to all this? I mean, as far as teachers going and coming and pace, it's got to affect their morale. Or
well, I think the morale of our staff has been injured. I do, and I hear about that a lot. It's with Agenda 2017, there's a lot more initiatives that they're responsible for relative to academic achievement. Saying that, we just did a survey in our district of our students, and it came out very positive. Especially, there was one point that I really took to heart, and the kids really feel that their teachers care about them, and so do the families. So for me, if we can really still convey that we care about those kids and we're going to do the best possible by them, and they're not really seeing those other pieces, then we have to support our staff to a great degree in order to keep it this way. Otherwise, the kids will start to see that, I'm sure.
Do the students ever bring up the fact that they have some empathy with the teachers, or is that pretty much ignored? Or
well, I think I don't know the specific question, and that might be another, if we can talk again sometime. I could bring Jim Schmidt, who pulls the data out of those surveys. Would be a really fun conversation to have for our community television. Yeah.
Do you have any students trying to take advantage of this of the situation, i.e. Teachers versus administration versus state legislature, state government?
Well, that wasn't on here, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been a public employee for a very long time.
I'm sorry.
And we don't do that in public schools, or I never did, and I never saw it ever happen where I would bring in my personal feelings relative to what I thought politically about anything. I mean, that's not kosher. That's not something that we're taught to do, and very cognizant of the fact that we have a variety of kids in our classroom from a variety of families with a variety of what they feel about their government and politics, and that's not part of what we do in the public schools. It is not.
And that's why I asked that question.
It is not.
Just to get it out in the open and let the public know that there is...
I think the good part of it, though, for me, is I spent my entire career at the preschool level, which is very connected to families. So it gave me a perspective. I mean, families are not hesitant in letting me know how they feel. And certainly I learn how to be empathetic with, what their thoughts are and how I can make it their experience within the public schools the best that it can be. But it also taught me that you need a bigger perspective. And I think that happens with a lot of public employees, where our thought process, or what we know, because of that experience, is probably greater than a lot of people, because we're forced to be able to be good listeners, to be empathetic, and to work with any realm or family that we work with.
Okay. And let's see, are we seeing more cooperation between the school board, the administration, and teachers? And we've just used 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think the cooperation, we're watching a timer here.
I'm having some fun with printers here.
I think, I don't know about more cooperation, but it looks different because of Act 10. And it maybe involves a little bit more people than those that are picked by your union to sit around a negotiations table. And as a board, I've been involved in the before, and now as a school board member, I can see the difference sitting on the other side of the table now after Act 10. And I don't know if it's a less of a voice, as I said, but we do things that we used to do. So in Eau Claire, I think that's a good thing. Like, we had meet and confer before, where the union membership were able to meet with administration. That still happens. That dialogue is still open. Concerns can still be brought. They can be worked out, and that's a really good thing. And we kept the pieces within the buildings that gave a voice there as well. And truly, when we do calendar and when we work on the handbook, those voices are there. So do we see more cooperation? Maybe more people involved, because they don't have the organization of the union to do all of that. But I think we have to keep that voice there. I mean, we have to work really hard to keep it there and to keep it robust and to keep it part of what we do in the district. I think it's an important thing to have.
I agree. Act 10 really curtailed the role of the union. So, what role has the union played, and how are negotiations? What do you focus on, and what do you accomplish, and how does it get accomplished?
Well, the only thing we have any negotiations around now is base wage. That's all. And it's tied to the consumer price index. So this year, the conversation has been the consumer price index, which is the 1.46%. Whereas before, we would negotiate a total package. You would look at salary and benefits. It really, all of that is gone. All we can really negotiate, using the word negotiate, is tied to the base wage.
And what about paying premiums for health benefits and retirement benefits? What's the story there?
Well, in Act 10, they kept saying that we should pay part of our retirement. Well, that was part of negotiations, and at times we did pay part of our retirement, and we were paying part of our retirement. And that stayed. And we had offered to do that before Act 10 anyway. And then the story out there was everybody had these expensive health programs, and We a Trust was brought up as one. I was hired in the district in 1979, and we never used We a Trust, so it wasn't in Eau Claire. We bid out. We always had an insurance committee that was part of the district, part of the community piece that we would involve, and we would bid it out, and we always went with the lowest bid. So for our taxpayers in Eau Claire, we always did that. But when you are talked about as a collective over the whole state, it really sent the wrong message. So we have always paid almost what Act 10 wanted us to do, we were already doing.
I don't know what to say to that. I don't know what to say to that.
A lot of people don't know that.
I think we know it now. Finally, I'm not going to mention any names here, but has there been any misinformation coming from the governor's office or certain people in the state legislation? I'm talking about leading misinformation about teachers or public education or...
Well,
May I give you an example of what I'm talking about?
Yes, you sure may.
Okay. You and I know that a lot of money was reduced, was taken away from public education. Now, we know that for a fact. And yet there are those who say, well, we just put in a certain amount of money, but it doesn't quite match the amount of money that was originally taken out. That's what I'm talking about.
You're right. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to give you a story about that. Back last fall, we got a little group together because we wanted to kind of get that message out there. So whatever was given back to taxpayers last fall with the budget, I don't know, I can't remember, it was like $1.3 million or whatever. And the whole headlines in the paper said that it was given back to public schools. But because of revenue caps, that's all that's left now from 93. The 2/3 funding's gone. The QEO, that 3.8, that was the ceiling for negotiations, is gone. The revenue caps are still there. Because of the revenue caps, the Eau Claire School District did not see one penny of that. That went back to the taxpayers for their school property tax. So you see, it's how, I wrote here when you asked this question, when you look at misinformation, I always say, if you keep things so complicated, then people make their own assumptions. And I personally want to invite the community, and I'll offer that. our district will go anywhere to talk about school funding and to give what actually the numbers are for their community and to educate them on the school funding and what it looks like for their schools. Because I personally, as a board member, and that's partly why I ran for school board, was to really be at a different level to talk about school funding. It's a passion I have for people to understand it, and a way for us to maybe get everybody getting the right information.
One of the things that the school district did was to urge people to make a contribution of $10 or
$13. That was the average amount of money when that money came back to a person's school property, for their school property tax. The average person, or the average amount given, was $13.
Mm-hmm. Huge
I'm
tax
speechless to say.
Huge tax
I am
break.
speechless to say, exactly. And we had over 400 people stand up and either come to a school board meeting or give it into our little group that we handed over to the school board, because they felt that was, people should understand what really happened there.
Last question.
And I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for stepping forward to do that.
We all want to thank him. You betcha.
Yeah.
You betcha. Last question. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know that you participated in negotiations, and would you like to discuss in more detail the negotiations you participated in as a member of WEAC?
Well, I guess, I don't necessarily think unless you participate in something like that people understand what that means either, because you usually do it in a closed situation. But my experience was we never sat around that table without thinking of our community first and where we were as far as the economy went. We never went to that table to ask for more than we really knew our community was able to give. And truly now, with the way the budget is, people just need to remember that as the staff within the Eau Claire School District, we're all members of the community, and certainly want our community to be the best it can be, and part of that is keeping our schools the best that they can be as well. So I looked at negotiations more as a way to compromise, a way to have discussions. I know as a board member now, and I've had other board members say that's where they learn the most about their staff and what was going on and what those conversations were and what people felt about things. It strengthened our school community as opposed to having it be anything that was antagonistic. So that was my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a good experience to have.
Well, I can see we have a total of 5 minutes left, and I would like to ask you this. When you're sitting in the negotiations, obviously you want to do what's best for the teachers, for public education, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have teachers doing their jobs in a positive environment, you don't have teachers getting people ready to go out and get a job after they graduate from high school. Without teachers, people don't get decent jobs because you have to learn how to read and write and do all that kind of thing.
Well, that's true. And I think there are other things within public education that come into play as well. For example, kids that come to public schools maintain their constitutional rights. That's not necessarily the case if they go to a private school. So they have a bigger voice, I think, coming to a public school. We have to listen. We have to listen to our communities, and we have to listen to it whether we like what we hear or not. And I think as far as the teaching profession, too, it's more than, or it's staff that support teachers. I mean, it's not just teachers. It's everybody within our school district, all our staff. We also serve the needs of the social and emotional pieces of our kids as well, and the families. I mean, we have a high incidence now of poverty, much higher than it was 10 years ago, much higher incidence of mental illness, and our connections with families are stronger. We have added all those things to our plate as far as what we do to publicly service our community. And it's huge. But we welcome that because I think we serve 11,000 kids and families, and that's where those services and those connections should take place. We just really need to fight, me as a board member, to keep the resources there that keep that good, that support our teachers, our staff, so that we can do the best job we can.
Now, I did say I was going to have one more question, but your answers really are good, and they prompt me to ask questions.
That's fine. I'm glad they do.
So,
I didn't really live there for 33 years and then get on school board not to know this. I mean, I work really hard to know these things, and I'm glad you asked the questions.
okay. Anyway, my last question, and I'm trying to recall it because I just simply forgot what I was going to ask. Boy, are we on top of things.
That's okay.
Aren't we?
That's okay.
But,
maybe we answered them all.
Okay, but, well,
have me back when you think of more questions. I'd love to come.
I'll send you an email, okay?
Yep.
But that's it for now, and I want to thank Chris. I want to thank you for being on our show. And, of course, I want to thank our audience for watching Labor Talks. Thank you very much.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.